Welcome back, you guys. I'm so excited. We're going to have this conversation with Mary Rose and Dr. Manette Riordan, and I'm Andrea Chebelou. You guys all know that by now. We're deep into the creative stretch. And this week we are having this conversation around curiosity, the delight of being, and discipline. Man, I know one of those really pricks in me, like this sort of gets my hackles up a little bit. And I wonder, like, how can that be for some people? They lean in and have like this, yes, that is my core value, discipline. That's the thing, right? That is like, I'm wondering, I want to meet those people. Like, how have you dealt with, and I know I'm starting at the end, right? But that, who cares? It's which one of these really gets that rise out of you? Which one do you lean into and like totally identify with, or which one gets that most visceral reaction from you? For me, it's definitely discipline. And I've worked really hard over the years to change my relationship with that word, of not thinking of it as being a negative word, like corporal punishment sort of discipline. Ooh, this is going to hurt, into a, here's some guidance. Here's some boundaries to follow. Here are some, here's the gentle way. Here's the path. Follow it. It's an interesting perspective but for some reason hardwired into my mind. When I think discipline, I think, getting up extra early and going out and running and pumping iron, like all of these. It's always exercise. Discipline is always tied to exercise to me for some reason. I don't know.
That's hilarious.
Right. But you know what? I do live a very disciplined, creative life. Like I have a routine
that you get up extra early every morning.
I do. And I love it. And you know what? It gives me all of this extra freedom and a delight of being. Since we're talking about that, it gives me the opportunity to explore what I'm curious about. So it all ties in.
I was going to say, I think it's time for you to get really curious about your resistance to discipline.
I think it's the word. that has these sort of connotations and ties to other meanings.
Do you know that the Latin root of discipline comes from disciple, which means to learn, and it's all, so the root of discipline is about being a student. It has nothing actually to do with obedience and compliance. And the definition that we're sharing this week, I really love. And it's that discipline is not rules, regulations, or punishment. It is not compliance, obedience, or enforcement. It is not rigid, boring, or always doing the same thing, which that one really got me. It's not something others do to you, but something that you do for yourself. You can receive instruction and guidance from one or many sources. We're all in this, experience now of receiving guidance, but the source of discipline is not external, it is internal. It's not obedience to someone else's standards to avoid punishment. So my inner child definitely has that reaction, but it is learning and applying intentional standards to achieve meaningful objectives.
Yeah,
and I love that.
I told that to my dad when I was growing up. Dad.
I know, right? And it's so true, right? And I think that every generation of parenting softens. So my first coaching certification was as a parent coach, long story. And one of the books we read was this beautiful book called Connection Parenting. And I loved how she talked about how generations of parenting, we soften the rigidity of that need for discipline, not letting go of boundaries or structure or guiding our kids, but it changes. And it was the norm, like corporal punishment in schools was the norm, which like kind of makes me sick to my stomach to even think about, right? And to see. So when I look at words like this that are prickly, I think that was the word you used, Andrea, prickly. And for me this week, interesting, delight of being is a little prickly, but we'll get there. But I'm leaning into discipline, especially as it flows from our conversations last week around commitment, right? Like to me, commitment and discipline go hand in hand. But I get to look at where am I disciplined in my commitments and where am I just talking out this out of my mouth like, oh yeah, I know I should get out there every morning and walk or run, or the discipline carries the burden of shoulds a lot of time for me, which then, gets that sort of cringy feeling. But I'm such an avid learner, and I know I'm in the room today with two avid learners. We're all such students of life, of art, of our own personal discovery, that discipline from that perspective is this incredible gift. So I don't know, I'm in this, like, I feel the tension of that, right? The tension of being a disciple of life and being disciplined in pursuing the things that I feel deeply called and committed to, or the things that I know would just make me feel better but I'm not doing. Mary Rose, I'd love to hear your thoughts on discipline and dads, and because I'm sure a lot of us have our dad sitting, for me it was my stepdad sitting on our shoulder.
Oh yeah, and my dad was the principal and eventually superintendent of my school. So actually,
I'm
and
so
before
sorry.
that, he was the disciplinarian and then the principal and then the superintendent. He was also a strict Greek father with the only girl. So
And how many brothers? You have quite a few
I have
brothers.
one older brother who was a complete rebel. So he would, and he's 5 years older. So he would constantly get into trouble. And I would see him get disciplined. And I'm a rules follower. I sat there with my hands folded and I did what I was supposed to do. And I was kept contained, So when I got these 3 words, I was like, curiosity, yes. Joy, yes. Discipline, crap. Okay, there's the challenge. But for me, I sat with the word. I'm with Andrea. The word is what got me, because the word put those memories in there. And I had a chat with the word discipline. And I was like, look, I will like you. I'm going to learn to like you. You need to learn to like me also. And I just had a conversation with it in my own weird way. And for me, it became showing up. I didn't put anything, what the action was, but what do I want to show up and be committed to? Then I was able to form the 3 words all together. And that's kind of how I approached it. But it took me a while. It took me a while to get past
I love
I
that.
love
Just
that.
that gentleness of just show up. Just show up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And depending on the day, what I'm showing up for could be different.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get away from the should also, I should be, active every day. Okay, well, I'm active in different ways. All these things fuel me. The creativity fuels me, the healthy living fuels me, connection fuels me. So what I'm showing up for, I allow myself to have it ebb and flow.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So I was going to say, why don't you flow right into delight of being and joy from that, Mary Rose, from that. Is that what you were going to say, Andrea, also?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
But just flow right into that from the showing up.
So I actually had a very interesting aha moment yesterday. I went back to these 3 words. I knew we were going to meet today. And I sat with them, and I sat with my little scribble notes and my research, and, kind of just sat with them for again. And I happened to see the word chaos in 2 different places in my notes, one related to curiosity and one related to discipline. And I was like, well, wait a minute, how'd that word come up in both? So one of my main core values is balance. So I had this image come into my head of a scale, like a balancing scale, and curiosity was on one side and discipline was on the other. And I thought, okay, well, when I'm heavy in discipline, I'm in that control state. You know, I'm in a box, maybe I'm judging what's happening. I'm light in curiosity. So if I'm in that control state, I can't be curious because I want to control what's happening. And then I thought, well, if I'm light on discipline, then I'm out of control. One of the antonyms of discipline is chaos. Then I could be heavy in curiosity. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. And I went to my notes and happened to see something I wrote, just kind of researching the words. One of the gifts of curiosity is that you learn to relax in the middle of chaos. So when you're not disciplined in chaos and you're heavy in curiosity, if you can approach the situation with curiosity and a wonderment, you can navigate the path a little bit more relaxed until you kind of get things back in balance.
So
So
where
the pivot point
where
is, for me, is the joy.
where does delight of being and joy?
It's right in the middle. So for me, the joy is riding the balance, because I love the detail work. I love to be committed. I love to be in control. I just can't sit there. I have a heavy balance of what if I do this? What if I try this? What if I put myself out there? You know, what if I trust that I'm good enough to be successful? Whatever's going on up here, you know? So I need that balance, and the joy for me comes from both ends. So I sat there and went, oh, okay, the light bulb went off, closed my book. I don't know how you guys put 3 words together that just fit me perfectly, but
it just keeps happening. I'm waiting for a week to be like, these are totally not related.
And have you noticed in previous weeks how many times the word curious came up? I was tuned into it. I'm like, there it is again, there it is again, there it is again. It kept coming up.
It's like my favorite word and one of my highest values. Like, it's top of the list for me. But sorry, Andrea, go ahead.
Yeah, it may be one of those, you know, higher level core values that, because I use it too. I'm like, I approach things, and I think it's even in one of my taglines, like I approach things with playful curiosity. Just like, what's going to happen when? Yeah.
And to do that, though, you have to let go of judgment. You can't be curious if you're judging what's happening along the way. You kind of have to let go of some of that control and judgment of the action. In the negative sense, there's definitely discernment and picking out as you're going. You're like, I'm curious what's going to happen when, and then you can't just, you know, throw it all out. You're like, oh, okay, well, that did that, and this is going to do this, and you know, this is how I'm going to choose to go forward with that information. But yeah, absolutely. I love the delight of being. The way that is described is the word joy, right? Joy is just the delight of being. And so often I find myself either spinning out, totally focused on, you know, the discipline aspect, the routine aspect. For me, I always think of discipline as like, you've got these set of guidelines. This is how you do a thing. You know, make your list and you check it twice, and you do your things and you follow through, and you know, achieve it and accomplish what you set out to do. And that for me is kind of how I approach discipline. And yet, you know, there is joy in doing that, because man, do I love checking those boxes off like that. It makes me happy. It's not that it's not a drag at all in that respect. And then I love the way that the delight of being, or joy, is nestled in between the curiosity, because then there's this whole other like, if I just had a whole day to do whatever I wanted with it, I'd kind of want a list. I'd kind of want a list to check off, right? And my joy comes from this sweet spot in between of,
approaching the what ifs with curiosity, and yet having some sort of structured guidelines, like I know we've talked a lot about facing the blank canvas or the blank page. If I have everything possible, man, that really stalls me out a lot of times. And I don't find much joy there. The joy that I find is like, oh, here's some limiting factors, like try 3 colors and some paper, see what you can do with that, you know? So yeah, seeking that, defining joy as being the delight of being, just being present, being here, being with whatever the circumstances are. We were talking beforehand, I've got something that I'm doing this afternoon that I'm not super excited about doing, but what can I find in that, that I can be joyful about? What in just being with what is, because it is what it is, what can I find in that circumstance that I can find delight in?
Yeah. And I'm curious about what you're going to find.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you sort of looked at it through the lens of our creative practice. And I'm sitting here and I love, Mary Rose, the visual, the symbolic image of the scales and balancing the scales. And so I would actually put curiosity in the center, and I would put discipline and delight of being on the sides of the scales for me personally, because where I personally get caught up is in too much doing and not enough being. And curiosity brings me back to who is it that I'm being in the world, in my day, in my relationships. So I can see how we could play for the next all of these 10 weeks with this idea of balancing these things on the scales and seeing it as this. For me, there's creative tension between being over disciplined or controlling, I like Mary Rose's word, and feeling like I have to do too much, versus where am I not allowing spaciousness to just be, to be playful, to be joyful. And I was looking ahead at the list, and you'll notice that we don't, I'm going to double check so I'm not speaking out of turn. We don't have happiness on the list, right? Because happiness is this sort of external thing that we're trying to achieve, or for me it's these fleeting moments. But deep joy comes from connection. It comes from curiosity. It comes from sitting at the beach, looking at the water with no need to do anything, giving myself permission to be without the structure of a to-do list. I'm really good at the to-do list. Like Andrea, I'm like, oh, checking things, like writing things down just so I can check them off that I'm getting done, so I feel more accomplished. Like, that's really easy for me. And what is harder is this permission to just rest, permission to settle, permission to just sit in deep, quiet conversation with myself. So to me, bringing joy comes from who I'm being, not from what I'm doing. And so I think that's where I can get really caught. And I personally think curiosity is God's greatest gift to us, because when we're curious, we're in the realm of possibility and openness, and it takes us out of judgment. It takes us out of the need to fix it or solve anything, and gets us squarely back into the spaciousness of, what might be possible, right? What if I tried, like, what if are my favorite 2 words, like, well, what if I, and when I approach any sticky areas of my life from that lens, it feels different. So I love what Mary Rose said, what Andrea said. So what if I just showed up for activity every single day and let go of any need to have it be rigorous or strenuous? But what if my delight in being flowed from showing up for activity? So like the almost, if we looked at him like a circle with the arrows in between, and that we just flowed between being, discipline, curiosity, discipline, being. Like, to me, I can see how, like, it's just so effing deep, this stuff. Like, I'm sitting here going, wow, the more that I sit with all of this, I'm like, oh man, this is so rich for me personally to just sit. And right now it's, end of the year. I'm thinking about business. There's planning to do, like there's Christmas planning to do, and juggling like 2 kids in different places and 2 of us, and trying to get us all to the same places. And, like there's a lot of chaos happening that requires some focused discipline to get the pieces done. And the end result of that is more delight of being with family brings me such great joy, right? And so it's so easy to fall into that chaos of to-dos instead of letting curiosity pull me back to center.
Yeah, and I think for me, I always have to keep a flow. Like I said, balance is one of my cores. I don't want to sit in discipline, forever, because then I can't explore, but I don't want to explore forever either. I think, like Andrea said, so many options. We have a saying in Zentangle, the elegance of limits. You get too much out there and then you're stifled. So I can't be in curiosity forever. I want to go back to my lists and my structure, and just have that balance for me. And that's my delight.
Beautiful. Well, it's been a lovely, as always, conversation over these core values, and I'm excited to see how they all play out in our creative lives and how we express these visually or write about them, or as we each of the 3 of us will present some sort of lesson around them. It's going to be fun to watch what comes out. I'm really enjoying watching what you guys are posting in the Facebook group. And if you aren't in the Facebook group, remember that you can also post in the comments in the classroom. You can share in there as well. I believe you can share imagery as well in there. So make sure that you take a look and read and keep up. And with the comments, you don't feel like you have to keep up. I caught myself saying that, like, don't feel like you're ever behind. You can dip your toe in wherever you are. And I know some weeks I have more time to devote to this, and some weeks I have less, and it's absolutely okay. However much time you spend on this, I think even, listening to this as you're walking around your neighborhood, if you're, so inclined to just listen to the conversation and let it sort of marinate in. It's going to take, these are seeds. They are germinating. They are going to fruit someday, somewhere, somehow. May not be this week. It may be months. It may be years from now that you're like, oh man, I remember that conversation that Manette and Mary Rose and Andrea were having around this. Yeah. So we know that happens. So just be gentle with yourself and have a lovely week. We're glad you were with us. Any final words, Manette, Mary Rose?
No, beautifully said. And I would love to just invite everyone to be in the delight of being this week as their approach to the playful space. What does that mean for you? Maybe it means less writing and creating and more just dipping your toes into the sand or the dirt or the grass or the snow, depending on where you live. Like, not bare toes in the snow, but
maybe
little snow angel time. Like, bring some energy of play back to the classroom.
Awesome. Thank you so much.